as we're looking at the evaluation of Partner 360, and whether it's this or any other investment, you got to look for the signal through the noise. And that's hard to do in today's world, right? We're looking for programs, we're looking for investments that reward behavioral shifts over transactions, because the transactions will come and go. But if we drive the right behaviors, both with our sellers, our go-to-market engine, as well as with our clients, we're going to achieve exponential results versus that singular deal right here and right now.
Welcome to Shift Happens. Kevin Brown is the VP of Partner Management at Insight, one of the world's largest and most strategically important technology solution providers, and one of Cisco's most significant global partners. Kevin's unique lens is shaped by three distinct career chapters. RSA, where he learned that in a crisis, the partner is the last line of defense. Vectra, where he sat in the OEM chair and experienced firsthand what it takes to internally evolve a major partner program, and such a long and rich history with Cisco going all the way back to his public sector days. Enough history to know that while version 1.0 isn't always perfect, Cisco always makes it right. Kevin doesn't just manage partnerships. He has a really interesting framework for evaluating them, a philosophy he uses to build them, and a very clear point of view on where the next 3 years are going. One more fun fact about Kevin. He takes his coffee with 2 shots of espresso. His friends call it the jumper cables. Kevin, welcome to Shift Happens. Let's get into it. Kevin, where does this podcast find you today?
Hey, Jeff, it's great to be here. This podcast finds me, for once, I'm actually not traveling this week, which is fantastic, but just north of the city of Chicago in a small town called Highland Park, Illinois. So looking forward to having this conversation.
Amazing, exciting time in Chicago. You got baseball season cranking up. Unfortunately, no NBA playoffs right now, but we'll work on that maybe another year, right?
It's okay. Really, it's okay. The Cubs are on a 7-game win streak. I'm a happy camper right now, so it's all right.
And the Bears are the real deal too. So it's a good time and a good to be a Chicago sports fan.
Yes, sir.
Good
yes,
deal.
Sir.
Well, I want to jump in. I want to jump in here because we've known each other for a long time, and it's really exciting. Shift Happens is mainly been bringing in subject matter experts from Cisco, and it really started back as we went through this Cisco 360 partner program evolution, which is also a really unique time for you. And I think the opportunity for me to have you join Shift Happens and provide a partner perspective to this change and evolution, as well as into the evolution of your career and your journey to the seat that you sat in today, Kevin. I am really excited and grateful for you to join. But let's start with something that, as I prepared and we spent some time getting ready for this episode, one thing jumped out to me and it stayed with me. And it was when you talked about how your career up until this point has really been shaped by 3 distinct pillars. The first one being RSA and your time there and the value of foundational trust and what that does for a relationship in a business. And then we went to Vectra, and if I remember correctly, it's this concept of ecosystem design and how powerful and important that is. And then you combine that with your time at Cisco and just the power of long-term collaboration and what you can do and what partnership looks like. That doesn't sound random to me. It sounds like a philosophy that you live through. And maybe let's go back all the way to RSA and jump in there around this concept of foundational trust and bring that to life for us and what that means for you.
No, most definitely, Jeff. And thanks again for having me. Just to give a little context. So again, I'm currently at Insight leading our partner management strategy, focusing on how we really bridge the gap between world-class technology and actual business outcomes that our clients are asking for. To your point, I spent nearly 20 years in this ecosystem, much of it side by side with Cisco, some of it at Cisco, some working with, and some completely separate. But if I look back to your point of what's really shaped me, it was those moments, candidly, when things didn't go right. I learned early on in my career that while partners or, Cisco may not be perfect, to your point, that hopefully in that spirit of partnership, things eventually get to that right stage. A lot of that is shaped with my human first lens and again, in a crisis, I'll be candid. I don't want a portal. I don't want an email address. I don't want a ticket to open. I want a person I can call. I want a person I can text and that's going to respond. And so, we'll get into it a little bit later as well, but the definition for me as well for partner management has fundamentally shifted too. Used to be about moving boxes and volume targets. But the way I'm looking at it today, it's more about a behavioral evolution. We aren't just managing vendors, right? We're managing the connective tissue between a client's ambition and their infrastructure reality in this case. But you mentioned a couple of those, pillars that have been really defined in my career. It was actually one of my earliest jobs, my second company I ever worked for. I found myself in the security space, and I landed at RSA Security. And I was fortunate enough to be the sell to and sell through account manager with one of a large national partner. And it was a really interesting time. They had just been acquired by EMC, and so we were working through some of those dynamics of being acquired by a large company that just didn't have as much security
Hmm.
DNA. But if you remember back when, and this is when security was at its infancy, EMC was actually one of the first companies in the world that was penetrated by what they used to call an APT, an advanced persistent threat, which was better known as a nation state attack. And
Yes,
what ended up happening, Jeff, was that as we were working with that large national partner, they were a user of RSA tokens. You remember those little tokens
I
back in the
do.
day
I
that the
do.
6 digits continue to roll through. And that nation state penetrated the walls of EMC's cryptography. And while they may not or may have gotten certain pieces of information, a lot of our partners as well as our customers were uneasy. They wanted to know, were I at risk? Did I need to go and replace my tokens? Did I need to look at certain things? And when you're talking about the last line of defense, I was able to partner up with my partner at the time, large national provider based out of Chicago, and we had about 5 or 6 thousand customers that we were
Wow.
working with, and it was a hallowing experience. I'll be honest with you. For about 6 months, we worked together because the reality is they had a lot more salespeople, they had a lot more customer success people, they had a lot more folks that were able to help us with the messaging. But it really came into that partnership that when things go sideways and things were not going great, I mean, let's be real, it was one of the first major cyber attacks in the world. It was because of the hold that RSA had on the ecosystem that we were able to partner and alleviate a lot of those issues with our clients. And again, some clients still wanted to replace their hardware, and that was okay. But the reality is that it was the partnership and it was that arm in arm understanding how do we go to battle. And so I really look at the first phase and the first pillar is foundational trust. Jeff, as a business colleague, do I trust you that when things go sideways, you're going to have my back? That's the
And
first
here's
thing.
But here's the thing, Kevin, I think that I love about that is it's not only if and when things go, they're going to go sideways, right? Like we know that. And the ability not only to have that foundational trust, but I think what that allows you and what I just heard in as you brought that to life is that large partner and RSA both had unique skill sets that they could bring to help solve this. And it was the trust to allow each other to do what they're uniquely qualified to do to help address that customer problem. And you build not only foundational trust for the partnership, but also with the customer by approaching it that way and putting them first. But let me jump to something else because this kind of brings us to today, but it also talks a little bit about how you approach things. You mentioned partner management, and you and I have both been around this a long time. And there's there's the role of partner management, but I think you look at it a little bit differently in terms of less about managing a relationship and more around being a general manager and really driving a long-term durable strategy. Did you always look at it like that, or was there a time where that shifted in perspective as you went through your career journey?
Um, I'll be honest, it's shifted. And that's, I think, one of the really unique things about this ecosystem that you and I have been part of for 20, 25 years at this stage is that it's not what it used to be.
Hmm.
Um, there are a lot of companies that are out there that are still in the 1996 version of partner management, and that's okay, from that point of view. But as we look to companies, whether it's an OEM or a partner solution integrator, in my estimation, you do have to continue to evolve to stay with times and not just the times from how Cisco is looking at us or how CrowdStrike is looking at us, but what are we supplying for our customers? And so, if I kind of think back a little bit, over my 20 to 25 years here, I've had a really good front row seat to what I'm kind of thinking around three different stages of this evolution as we talked about. First stage is I kind of looked at it, again, way back in the day. Let's be real, it was logistics. It was
Yeah,
pure
yeah.
fulfillment. It was how do we get boxes and product from point A to point B. And that's even, a little bit of that RSA story. It fits in very well. Like there were tokens that needed to get to clients, and that even in a crisis, that model worked. Now, as we've moved into the solution phase, there's a lot of this conversation that people are talking about the value add era, right? It wasn't just the box anymore. It was how do you implement it? Whether it was good or bad or ugly, how did you actually get in there and add value to that? But let's be real, Jeff, as clients become more savvy just around their own infrastructure and the things that they're trying to get accomplished, they've also realized that there's a component of artificial intelligence today that just isn't a value add anymore. It's a ante into the game, if you will. But it's really about wrapping around these outcomes. More and more customers, and I know business outcomes is an overused term, but more and more customers, candidly, aren't as concerned with what the boxes or the widgets are underneath. They want to know, what am I signing up for? What am I
Of
going
course.
to get from this? And so I kind of call this, though, the ecosystem, because the reality is that very few manufacturers or OEMs can truly provide from level 1 to level 7 support, from the hardware nuts and bolts and silicon to the API and the application. And so they're not buying a single product. Customers aren't just buying one product. They're trying to buy capabilities. And so, the way that we're looking at it from Insight's point of view is partner management truly acts as that general manager of that business unit. Together with our partners, whether it's Cisco or others, we're authoring together a long-term strategy that includes off hardware, services, and software that, in theory, to the client should be inseparable. You don't pull those apart. But really, those three stages I kind of looked at again, just to recap: the logistics era,
Hmm.
moved into the value add, and now I'm talking about it more in the ecosystem. I'm talking more and more with my peers about how do we enhance our customer experience than a lot of other places in the business.
And I think looking at it through a general manager lens brings you to different conclusions as well as you look across there, right? Because and here's the interesting thing is if you look at logistics, like that still has to be true, but that's just table stakes, right? You look at the value add, that is an expectation now that there is a value added wrapper around, whether that is some type of recurring service that you offer. But then to truly deliver the outcomes our customers expect, it very rarely will come from only one particular integrator or player. It's going to be an ecosystem to deliver that, much like you described. And I think that's where, to me, your lens is so fascinating because you have seen it from all different sides now. And maybe let me ask this and try to, share, if you will, a little insight to the people. Like, because you've come from that world where you've seen it from both sides, what's a perspective that you think you have that a lot of people might miss in a role like you're in right now?
I hate to say it, but sometimes it's the bigger picture that, taking down a deal right now could actually be more impactful or more detrimental to your longer term business, and understanding what's the longer term goal. I continue to go back to, we were talking about a little bit of the foundations. We're talking a little bit about ecosystems, and then we're talking about the longer term collaborations. I think that the perspective here is that I've sat on multiple sides of the equation and really understanding, how do we make this? I know a lot of people, Jeff, talk about a win-win scenario, but it's truly win-win-win when it comes down to it. And how do we really drive that as a perspective? It's everything from, the emphasis on recurring revenue to
Hmm.
satisfy certain Wall Street, numbers. And again, those are good for business.
Hmm.
But it's being able to sit in people's shoes and understand. It's funny. I was having a conversation this morning with a longtime mentor of mine, somebody at Cisco, a senior director, and we were bouncing ideas off of each other, just understanding. And he's asking my opinion that I've worked at Cisco, but now I'm on the other side and working with
For
Cisco.
sure.
And well, it's just it's a great opportunity to empathize and sometimes to sympathize as well with the others. But I think it's all about that long term collaboration and being able to help people get to where they need to be.
Yeah, and you bring up that the win-win, and it's funny as you were saying that I was thinking about walking a mile in someone else's shoes, and I think it while that term may be overused and it's been around forever, the reality is there's power in that. Because if you can understand the challenges and the outcomes that each side's looking for, you can find very often is this a zero sum where one has to lose, one has to win. it almost always is a chance once we align what we both need to be true, we find greater opportunity. And more importantly, we serve the customer a little better.
I find when we all orient around the customer, more often than not, Jeff, things take care of themselves. Now, with that being said, if we do this because we like to take care of our families when it comes down to it, but the reality is that if we all orient ourselves around the customer's expectations more times than often, we all come out in the right side of it.
It's so true. And that's, I mean, if we just use that as our North Star, good things follow, right? Around orienting around the customer and the outcome we're trying to provide. And now we're going to get into the fun part, Kevin, because not only did you come into this role, and you had this experience, but we Cisco decided we were going to take 20 plus years of an established industry leading partner program and dump it out on the floor and rebuild, but more importantly, rebuild with our partners. And that sounds good on a podcast. I mean, I think it does. But in reality, it gets messy. And I know that you have a really, really unique perspective. And I would almost call it a framework with how you evaluate this type of change and any investment that you're doing around programs like this. And I think the term you use as a partner investment rubric, keep me honest. And I think there's three layers to that. But as take us back to when you found out about 360, what was going through your mind? And then how did you start to use this framework to evaluate it where it was today and then ongoing?
So it's funny, when I exited Cisco, that journey was just beginning. And frankly, Jeff, I was a little bit out of the ecosystem for a little bit. I went to Vesa and I was in that security OEM conversation. And then I jumped back in here at Insight back last September when things were somewhat, I don't want to say in the final phases, but we were in the conversations on how to really streamline and to make adjustments. What I do appreciate though, and I'll tell you, and again, Cisco's different when it comes down to it. And some of that is the partner centric history, the 25, 30 years when it comes down to it. Cisco truly co-created this with their partners. So my predecessor was in the room when it all started, right? I was in the room as we continued through the transitions. We were there together in Chicago as we started to fine tune. Me and my peers at, what I look at as my competitors, but those are some of my best friends when it comes down to sharing advice and understanding what's going on at some of these other larger national partners. And so Cisco definitely takes a different point of view. And again, to your point, it does sound good on a podcast, the co-creation. um, Very few do this, and even lesser do it well. And again, to that theme that we talked about before, is that while Cisco may not always get it right the first time, they definitely over time do make it right for their partners because they do look at that as their strategic differentiator. Now, as we're looking at the evaluation of Partner 360, and whether it's this or any other investment, there's a big common theme that you always have to look at. You got to look for the signal through the noise, right? And that's hard to do in today's world, right? We're looking for programs, we're looking for investments that reward behavioral shifts over transactions, because the transactions will come and go. But if we drive the right behaviors, both with our sellers, our go to market engine, as well as with our clients, we're going to achieve exponential results versus that singular deal right here and right now. And so, just from a basic standpoint, it's signal versus noise. But I do have some thoughts on, I guess, pragmatically how I look at things, Jeff, too.
Yeah, and the signal versus noise, because there we do live in a noisy time, right? It's so easy, and the ability to take what may seem asymmetrical signals and start to, because of your perspective, zoom out and start to make sense of those signals, right? I think is really smart. And then what I love is I, I I talk a lot about be careful on getting really good at optimizing transactions as opposed to building durable long-term business outcomes with your partners and your customers. And I think that this framework probably helps you look and say, is this going to be durable? Or is this going to feel short term? So take us through that framework if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, listen, right, especially over here at Insight, and I would imagine at many other partners as well, our biggest asset internally is our people. It truly is. It might be the ERP or whatnot, but like the reality is that it's my sellers and my engineers in the field. And anytime that we take them away from talking with clients and partners, There's an opportunity cost to that. And so with any program that we're looking at, Jeff, we're really looking at how does this align? And so, realistically, as we look at this kind of the scoring methodology, I kind of look at three different vectors. The first is, the outcome. The second is the human infrastructure, and then the resources that are going to be required. And so if we go back to the first, the outcome alignment, the reality is some of the questions that I ask myself and my team, and again, this is not a one man show, but it's the reality of our entire business together, is does the partner's roadmap solve a problem my customers are going to have, not just now, but in the future?
Right.
Like table stakes. Like, do they solve that problem? Does it make sense? Does the technology require my team to learn a completely new way of selling? Are we selling differently? Is that against the grain or can we go with the waves? And then let's be real from our point of view on the outcomes is how can Insight wrap around our services around this? Because otherwise I'm just reselling Cisco or reselling CrowdStrike or whatnot. I want to be able to make it an Insight offering that is truly differentiated. So we look at that from an outcome point of view. And if it kind of checks a lot of those boxes, we'll be like, okay, let's continue to explore. Then we get to that second piece, and it's the human infrastructure side. And I kind of mentioned this a little bit before. I look at it as the safety net. If a deployment goes wrong at Friday night at 7 p.m., do I have that phone number of an executive that again didn't just give me their phone number in passing, but that are going to pick up the phone? Does that partner of ours admit when there's a problem with their product versus blame Insight? And frankly, again, do they have a track record of making it right, even if it costs them money when it comes down to it? So, it's really bundling all that humanality into this, even in an AI first world today. It's again, I still truly believe that it's all about the human element of this. And then the third piece of it, as we look at resources, there's a lot of, I'll say, check the box activities that happen in the partner world today, whether it's for a contract, whether it's for a certification, but like beyond the official certification to be able to do or to sell or to consult, how much unpaid time will my engineers spend on this? How much time are they going to spend troubleshooting? Again, kind of going back to that first point, is the sales motion simple enough for a seller to pitch alone? And then the third piece of that resource is, let's be real, right? We've got a lot of A players. Is it going to disrupt them from doing great billable work? And so
That's
we really look at that.
I think it makes a ton of sense. And let me play back a couple things just to
Yeah,
make
please.
sure that I heard it correctly. So one, around the outcome alignment, it really is, and we'll be super specific here in the role that you're in. Our insights and Cisco's priorities when we do any type of change or have discussions around investment, are those priorities, do they have an intersection that is meaningful and aligns with customer outcomes that we're both trying to solve for, right? And business problems. Number two, is there a is there a way for Insight to differentiate that offer that they bring into the market by wrapping your unique value add around that offer? Because we know that that then leads to revenue acceleration as well as durable profitability for Insight. Did that capture the outcome alignment? Okay.
100%, Jeff.
So now we're going to get to what I've heard you call the bat phone. And I think it's so true because in a world of automation, or at least the move towards automation, there's it could be really appealing to have a ticket system where, Kevin, if something goes wrong, you just pop in a note and a ticket pops out and we take it like that. Except that's not the bat phone you're looking for in times of crisis. Bring that to life for me.
I mean, let's be real. We'll still log the ticket so that you got a paper trail when it comes down to it.
I
But the
appreciate that.
reality,
Thank you.
but the reality here is, especially in the partner ecosystem, relationships are probably the most durable thing over time. Whether you shift roles, whether I shift companies, we have still stayed in close contact. And so that allows us to continue to build on a 20 plus year relationship. And that doesn't end when things go wrong. And so the ability to pick up the phone to you, to Tim, to, Lindley, any of the executives at Cisco and to say, Kevin, we're on it, right? We're deploying our best people to meet Insight in the field to go and fix this problem. right here, right now, whether it's a Saturday morning, end of month cutover, whatever that looks like, but that we have those joint aligned goals ultimately. But again, it's one thing if I can send you an email and you respond. But again, 7 o'clock family time on a Friday evening, for me to call and for you to pick up, that means a lot to the partnership. And that's why we develop these deep relationships over time so that we can make those phone calls. And frankly, we expect for you to make those phone calls back to us. It goes both ways and that we'll pick up when it comes down to it. But again, it's all in vein of partnership and making sure that our customers are seeing fantastic success through our joint solutions.
And back to that concept that we started with, foundational trust. Like it is meaningful that you would pick up the phone to call at 7 o'clock on a Friday, right? Because it means that you trust that I'm going to pick up and then we're going to handle this together. And then I think the last thing, and it's important because many times we get enamored with the opportunity or the evolution itself, but we don't realize that there are real people that are going to have real resource impact as far as taking them away from something else. And at the end of the day, the opportunity on the other side of that evolution has to be great enough for that value exchange to work, right? To pull them out of the field. So I love looking at this, and I know that as we rolled out 360 and we sat beside each other, I think in Chicago, right in September, and in your hometown, I know you well enough to know the gears were turning. And you mentioned signals earlier. How did as you became more comfortable with 360, the concept of a partner value index, looking at different capabilities, skill sets, and deliverables inside of an architecture. What were those signals and how did it align with where Insight was going in the market?
Insight over the last handful of years has been working towards, let's be real, transitioning from a VAR to a solutions integrator, and frankly, an AI first solutions integrator. And so, if we looked at the older programs, a lot of it was that logistics era conversation. You sell this box, you get a percentage back. And again, we had optimized, we'd done a really good job in
Hmm.
working through those conversations. But the 360 program, the way that it was architected, really allowed us to reinforce some of the behavioral changes that we were looking at. How do you look at not just performance? Because and again, that's important, but all the other activities. How are you looking at adoption? How are you looking at enablement? How are you looking at onboarding throughout the entire components to not just say, are you selling a box and getting rewarded for it? But are we doing the entire lifecycle approach? And that's where Insight's been moving towards over the last handful of years. And so it actually met up at the right time in the right scenario. And again, we've been investing prior to me coming on, prior to Cisco fundamentally changing the program itself. Now, again, let's be real, Jeff. Are there tweaks that need to be made in the program? Of course, right? But that's the beauty of
100%.
this relationship is that Cisco listens. And Cisco truly does listen to their partners, take the feedback. And again, it's a balance. There are certain activities and certain metrics that Cisco needs to hit. And then there's certain activities and certain things that the partners need to hit. But ultimately, like I said before, Cisco 99 times out of 100 makes it right in the end. And so I do think that it's a great opportunity as we've transitioned through this conversation um, in 360.
And it's that balance, right? Finding the balance for both Insight and Cisco on what works for both of us. And you mentioned earlier, any partner program is meant to drive the behavior that we want to see together. I recently had Brian Overmeyer, who I know you know from your days at Cisco,
Sure do.
and it really struck me. I don't think at least I give enough thought to how difficult finding that balance is, right? Of how we drive that and how we build out the behaviors that we know will translate into delivering those customer outcomes. And so, yes, very much just the same as when you sell into a customer with like an enterprise agreement. And that's just the start of the sale. This is just a start of 360 for us together, right? Like we're going to continue to evolve and get better at this. But maybe if you'll allow, let's jump directly into Insight now and maybe double click in. And AI is causing us all to look at the way we go to market, what our customer expectations are, where we're going to be. You mentioned 12 to 18 to 24 months away, but you've mentioned this idea around AI and a solution integrator pivot that Insight's in the middle of right now. What does that mean?
There's a lot to unpack there, my friend. A lot to unpack. Realistically, I don't think any of us can foresee what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. But as we're kind of looking at the next evolution of Insight, I truly think that there's going to be a couple of main pivots that everybody's going to have to make. And one, to your point, is the physics of AI. The other is the ethics that we have around data. And again, data is a different conversation to maybe some of those at Cisco. It's been a little bit ancillary from that point. But if you look at it overall, I truly think that together, Insight and Cisco, we have the ability to make that join together. And where Cisco has traditionally done, let's just call it the plumbing on certain things, how do we go and make this real for our customers? And so I'm looking at it from how do we move from being a plumber to an architect, right? When you own the plumbing, in a story kind of conversation, you have the best view of the house. And because ultimately we manage that fabric, right? The plumbing underneath it, the network. Cisco's the first one to see when the data starts to drift or when securities are being tested, when there's things that are happening in the network. And the reality is that together we're not just fixing those leaks. We have the ability to go and re-architect the house to support the weight of these new workloads. AI is going to change fundamentally the way that networks are architected. We're already seeing this today. But then you kind of start to look at the economics of this, right? The reason why Insight and Cisco own this space is that the plumbing per se has become the new CapEx gatekeeper, right? You can have the best AI model in the world, but if you have latency, the
Uh,
plumbing, if it's
Yes.
bad, your model's useless. Nobody's going to use it. It's people are going to go and start to use, the random chat GPT models or Anthropic or things like that. The ability for us together to turn that plumbing into a competitive advantage by ensuring that the data moves at the speed of how you and I think. And I think that's a massive, massive opportunity. But then, as we know, and we've seen in the recent weeks around Mythos and different conversations around Glasswing, then you get into the ethics of this data and the ethical plumbing conversation. And the reality is, Jeff, is that together we're not just moving that data, right? We're working together to govern how it flows, right? That's powerful when it comes down to it. Everything from repatriating the data from the public cloud to a private offering powered by Cisco and Insight. We're physically ensuring that together we're bringing that company's proprietary data and the very foundational ethics that it stays within the four walls of that institution. And I think that a lot of that is going to help to dictate everything that a company does. And that really impacts everything from, I've talked a lot about Cisco, but think about the things just around devices, right? Insight has a massive device business, and we do some really interesting things with device as a service with some of our other partnerships. But that impacts how people acquire laptops. That impacts how people put networks, printers on the network. That impacts everything around it, but it's all underflowing. It's all underpinned by the data. And if the data is dirty, nothing else is going to work. Nothing else is going to work.
And and that data becomes so important. But I don't want to go, but you mentioned the physics of AI, and we hear about it, but it's real. Like that space power and cooling has to be true, right? Before you can do much else. And that becomes table stakes. But then it is now you have data. But to your point, what type of data, how you use that data, what type of network that data runs on will determine very often the success or failure of the use cases that you're ultimately trying to deliver into the business, right? Because that becomes the outcome that you're delivering. And the thing that I think weighed on me as you were describing that is it went all the way back to the word trust and that foundational trust. And I do believe that right now, with so many unknowns in terms of where AI is going, how it will be delivered, what are the use cases of the future, having a predictable, trusting foundation like Cisco's infrastructure, like Insight's ability to deliver that infrastructure and guide customers through some of the unknowns that are coming becomes really important. And to do it with a track record of ethics and understanding that this has to be secure in the way that it's delivered as well. I still think I guess, question to you, how 1 to 10, where do you think we are in early stages? I know it's still early stages, so I don't think anybody would say we're 8 or 9, but where do you think we are in our ability to start to deliver those things to our customers?
It's interesting. I was talking about this with a friend of mine last week, and to some degree, this has some reminiscence of when cloud came out, right? And again, I know that we're not at 0 or a
Hmm.
1, but to your point, we're not at a 9. Everyone's like, I got to go to the cloud. but nobody really knew why. They just had a board level initiative to go to the cloud. And in a lot of situations over the last 12 to 18 months, people have been like, I have to have AI. And they don't really know what that means when it comes down to it. When we're having this discussion, you get some aspects where you have a lot of clients that are at that level one, level two, stage one or two of
Hmm.
their journey and just trying to figure out what does this mean to them? What use cases can we be successful on? And then you go to the opposite side of the spectrum where you see in the news, around mythos and the scariness of what something like that can have, if it gets out. And, you kind of jump to the whole Skynet conversation. And again, I'm not a tinfoil hat type of guy right now, but we'll see where that goes.
I
The
heard the
reality
right
is
now. Okay. So we'll check back in 6 months, right?
we'll,
Okay.
we'll, we'll we'll check back, but the reality is that there's so much unlimited potential when it comes down to this. But it all comes down to is, are we in the right place where we can provide the right governance around the artificial intelligence, providing our customers with the right planning to achieve those use cases? It's interesting. Insight as shortly after I joined, so I joined in September. In October, we made an acquisition of a company called Inspire 11, who incidentally is based out of Chicago as well. 400 AI professionals. And their whole philosophy, Jeff, was that consulting is broken because in the past, it was the whole conversation as to, hey, we're going to provide you with this strategy. Here's your playbook, go execute. And our CEO at the time found and thought through, hey, if we can take this opportunity to drive strategic roadmaps, but then join with our strategic partnerships like Cisco, we have a unique opportunity to go and change the ballgame for our clients. And so, as we've been working together with the Insight 11 executives, they see value. Whereas before they said, go run on whatever compute you'd like, run on whatever storage you'd like. Now they're seeing the value of the Cisco full stack architecture with Splunk included
Right.
to really drive differentiation in the market. And it's interesting. They've won numerous awards, which we're starting to replicate with the Cisco teams around one really simple question. What is your biggest opportunity for growth? Or said differently, what is your biggest hindrance to growth? And if a customer can answer that question, we have an opportunity to partner with Cisco to go and solve those customer challenges.
And I did not hear, Kevin, you mention any products, any SKUs in that question. Like it truly is like, what's the biggest opportunity and what's going to keep you from realizing that opportunity? Because that establishes not only aspirational goals, but it brings you into current state. It brings you into the technical debt that would keep you from being able to do that. And that opens up all types of different conversations.
And listen, Jeff, all that'll get sorted out over time. But again, like I had a great opportunity about a month and a half ago to go and present to one of the enterprise software and services team in Nashville. It was a great time, a lot of old friends there. And I could have taken the traditional route of, hey, here's Insight, here's all the great stuff that we do, here's how we help our clients. But we talked about the art of the possible. And I said, I don't want to attack every single one of your clients together. But I said, who are the two or three clients that you have the ability to go and change the way that they fundamentally do business with Cisco? And that team came back with three clients that they wanted to volunteer. And we're starting down those workshops together. And so it's powerful because to your point, I'm not going in with a security message. I'm not going in with a let's go and refresh your network perspective. It's truly from the
Right.
client's point of view. How do we help to grow their business?
So knowing that as you take that approach, there's some things that are top of mind, at least for me, and I know in some of the conversations we've had, and the opportunities that exist around things like agentic ops, things like sovereign AI migration, things like managed service capability, and the ability to deliver these offers as outcomes through a managed service. Where's Insight doubling down over the next 12 to 24 months? And what keeps you up at night, but not because you're worried it's not going to work, but because there's so much opportunity if you get it right.
I mean, a lot of what I talk about with my team, Jeff, is clarity and accountability. So, what are we going to help to drive? And then ultimately, how are we going to measure it from that point of view? As we're looking at the next handful of months from Insight's point of view, we're going through an awesome transformation right now. Um, we just welcomed a new chief executive officer. His name's Jack. He joined us last week, and he's really going to be setting the stage for us moving forward. But what he's shared with us so far is that we're going to continue to double down as that AI first solutions integrator. right? Helping us through that transition. It's going to be things like managed outcomes, hybrid by design. And this aligns with Cisco's AI ready infrastructure, things like the secure AI pod in the factory, partnered
Yes.
with NVIDIA, right? It provides the validated blueprint together, to your point, to solve that power and cooling and networking challenge. That's a huge piece of it. But as I'm looking at that, and we talked a little bit before about the ecosystem, I'm looking for meaningful co-investment together, right? Not just from Cisco and Insight, but from some of those other ecosystem partners, whether it's NVIDIA, whether it's now Everpure or other companies like that, to create these living labs. And that's when we're talking about how to, what it keeps me up at night is how do we continue to stay in the forefront of our client's mind. It's working with the Cisco architects to embed conversations into our consulting practice that ultimately helps our clients prove not just ROI, but it's looking at it differently than what is that tax that the cloud used to do for us.
Right. I the living lab thing really is it's a great way to describe it because it's not just an insight lab with a static environment, right? It meets your customers and our shared customers where they are and brings this to life based on the ecosystem needed to deliver that business outcome. I love it. I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball here now, Kevin.
Let's roll.
I know you well enough to know you'll knock this one out. So if I were to say 3 years from now, Kevin, you're going to join Shift Happens on episode 200, and we wanted to paint a picture of if if everything goes right, because I love I forget who I saw on TV, but they talk about this concept. Everybody talks about what if it goes wrong, like what if it goes right, like what if it all goes right? What does an Insight Cisco partnership look like 3 years from now?
Oh, man, it's funny. We've been painting this picture for our teams because we've got some pretty audacious goals, Jeff. Right. So you're talking about 3 years. We've got a pretty audacious goal to double our Cisco practice in the next 2 years. So I mean,
Speak.
we're really looking to expedite it from that standpoint. But I truly believe that we're sitting on a fundamental shift in the way that we do business and a fundamental opportunity to change the landscape, not just for Insight, but also for Cisco. With our tens of thousands of buying customers, we have a small fraction that we're working with to help them transfer and translate their AI infrastructure. How do we go and help those clients from the small business to the large enterprise, drive that transformation? If I'm looking at what this looks like in 3 years from now, I truly think that we fundamentally changed the way that we are interacting with Cisco and with our customers. It's helping them through and on that journey from artificial intelligence, from everybody from the small business all the way up to the largest of enterprise. Truly, we've escalated our opportunities with inside Cisco. Cisco is looked at as a trusted partner and not just a vendor with inside Insight's walls. And candidly, we've changed the trajectory of Insight in totality. And I said to one of my friends the other day, I truly believe that we are sitting on one of the largest gold mines in IT history if we execute correctly. But Jeff, I still think it comes down to that human element, that what we've been talking about. Do we trust each other? And it's not just
Absolutely.
you and me. It's not just, Keith and Tim, but it's really looking at ultimately, do our players in the field that are doing the right things for our customers have a solid relationship built on trust? And the answer is right now, I'd give it a B.
Yeah.
Not an A, but a B. A lot of opportunity to grow.
That is it's such a great, no pun intended, insight into how do you double the business because it doesn't double just because we set a goal. It doubles because of the framework we put in place that allow us to do that, that makes it profitable business. And Insight wants to double, that builds the trust. And trust is built in the little things. It's like our executives will be fine. They will have fantastic interactions. But where it comes to life is in the field, in those interactions, and being willing to set together and look at the customer and say, what are your greatest opportunities? And what's going to keep you from achieving those opportunities? And how can we solve that together? That's the path to get to the goal of doubling the business. And so, last one that I want to ask you before we get to the lightning round is what advice would you give? Because I know there's other partners, and I love your perspective, not only from inside of the Insight lens, but also, again, based on your history and what you've done previous to this, what advice would you give, or what do you think maybe partners fear that they shouldn't? What are a couple pieces of advice that you would give to partners that are navigating this same transition?
Yeah, and listen, there's the transition just with Cisco in general, but let's be real, there's a unique situation that's going on in the market right now. A lot of people compare this to COVID. A lot of folks that I've talked to, frankly, with the GPU constraints and the compute conversations, it's actually more challenging than COVID because it's a whole different, supply and demand economics. But if I'm really looking at advice for other partners, if I'm looking at the 20-year journey that I've been on myself and this advice, I wouldn't necessarily fear the hardware pause, right? Some customers are pausing hardware and doing cloud and conversations like that. Listen, if a customer is waiting for that gear, and it might be 9 months until they get the GPUs that they need to. And frankly, Cisco and us, like, we can't necessarily help with all that because there are truly material constraints. Sell data readiness, talk about governance, talk about how do you help to set that foundational layer of the conversation. Because again, the hardware is just the engine, the data is the fuel. We've talked about this plumbing before, right? If the fuel is dirty, the engine's not going to run. And so I would have you really think about the hardware pause. But then, secondly, Jeff, and again, this has been a theme in the conversation throughout the entire episode today, is focus on that human API, right? In the world of automated portals, partner relationship systems, like, our competitive advantage, I truly do believe, is still the ability to text somebody at Cisco whenever I need to get a problem solved. Relationships are the only things that don't depreciate. Invest in those relationships. And probably the third point that I would share with you and my peers is, and again, this one's hard depending on where you're at in this transition, but measuring consumption, not just bookings. If the customer isn't turning that gear on, using the software, they're not going to renew. I was talking with one of my peers that runs our lifecycle practice earlier today, and we were talking about, when you close that enterprise agreement, to your point, the real conversation
Yes.
starts that next day, the day two conversation. So if I'm really thinking about the advice here, Jeff, it's lean into the hardware conversation. And that's okay if there's long lead times. That allows you to have a differentiated type of a conversation. Focus on that human API. And then over time, it's going to migrate to that consumption economics as opposed to just selling and delivering.
What great advice, and I think it's advice that everyone can take. But you said something that I don't know that I've heard before. Don't fear the hardware pause, but it's so true because there's a saying that I love to use. Sometimes you have to go slow to go fast, and I think there's so much going on that this what may seem like a delay or an inconvenience may give us the time to do the things so that that data is clean and structured. So when we get that hardware, we can run those use cases and feed those models to get the outcomes that we're looking for to drive true consumption, not just bookings. That's the name of the game.
Spot on.
Um, Really well said, Kevin. Thanks for sharing your story and your journey. And I think there's a lot of really good advice and information and just pieces of really good nuggets of information that I think all of us can use. But we're in the lightning round now. It's time to get going, and I'm going to jump around. So I gave you some hints, but you don't know what's coming, and so I can't wait to see how this goes. So, what is a book or a thought leader that's had the biggest influence on how you lead?
Jeff, it's not going to surprise you who I'm going to say here, or at least it shouldn't. I'm actually going and reference Joe Madden. And you're like, well, thinker, a book? But let's be real, for those of you that don't know Joe Madden, the manager of the 2016 World Series championship, like the Cubs right in my
I mean,
background
of
here.
course, we're going there. Okay, got it.
We have to. But here's the reality behind it. It's all about his leadership philosophy. And if you actually ask him or you read any of his books, he actually says that he doesn't have a philosophy. But it's interesting if you actually dig into it. His philosophy is that he's had the opportunity to work with some really great coaches and general managers. He's also had the opportunity to work for some really poor coaches and general managers. And the idea there is that he gets to adapt and adopt. And so in his thought process, he is taking the great things from the great leaders that he's worked with and worked for. And he is also then being hyper aware and minimizing the aspects of some of the leaders that he has not enjoyed working with. and either being conscious and cognizant about minimizing or not portraying those aspects. But he builds that into his own style. And so it was really interesting as I was going through some of my leadership journey. That's a way that I do it. I'm not, some people portray themselves as servant leadership or whatnot. My whole philosophy is I've worked with some really great individuals. And then there's some individuals that I wouldn't run through a wall for. But that has shaped how I show up for my team and ultimately how I show up for my partners.
Absolutely adore that because it is so true. We get to choose. Like you don't throw away the bad experiences. If you do, you missed a chance to learn who maybe you don't want to be as well in that moment.
Exactly.
So really good.
Exactly.
Love that. What's the biggest myth about working with a large global partner like Insight?
Biggest myth. I think the biggest myth is that large global partners are slow and bureaucratic. The reality is that if we have the right clarity and accountability together, I mean, man, we can move fast and drive massive global impact. I'm going to leave it there because I truly believe that that's a huge myth, and that if we're all aligned, we can drive some incredible experiences for our clients.
Well said. Now I'm going to go out on a limb and ask a question that we'll see where we land. Cisco 360 and the new partner value index. Work hard or a business plan?
That's a good one. I'm going to take an easy answer to that, and I'm going to say it's both. Because the way I look at it, Jeff, is that it helps us understand what's expected of us. For some of those partners that may not be as mature of us, it helps give them that roadmap, but then it also keeps score. And that's very powerful when it maps back. It allows us to have differentiated conversations around what we're doing to not just be that logistical partner that maybe companies have been in the past, but it's really talking about the outcomes that we're providing for our customers. So I'll say both on that. That I think it is a scorecard, but it also allows us to think forward around a business plan.
I think it's really thoughtful. Kerry McDonough, who I know you know, he used to pound into my head, inspect what you expect. And so having a business plan is good, but having a set of accountability and inspection points to be able to know that you're moving forward on that business plan produces that scorecard as well. So last one, and I'm going to end with this. I need your morning ritual, but I need to understand where the jumper cables fit into that morning ritual.
All right, all right. On a traditional morning, I usually wake up around. I'll say my alarm goes off around 5:10. I am one of those guys that hits snooze usually twice. Just is how it is. And I try to go to the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning. Um, I find that if I wait till later in the day, I'm not one of those I'm going to do it at 7 p.m. type of people. But I come home, I get the kids ready for school. That morning routine is really important to me, both for myself and my family. But we get them to the bus. And then probably one of my most favorite times of the day, Jeff, is I take my two dogs for a walk. It's about a 15 to 20-minute loop every morning. And through that process, it gets my physical exercise going. It also gets that 20 minutes of sunshine that is fantastic for mental
Yes.
health. Even in the deep winters of Chicago, right? We bundle up and we rock and roll. And then I come home and I make my coffee. I'll tell you a quick story about the jumper cables. I had an opportunity before my father passed away to go to Italy with my family. And I remember very early on a morning, him and I walked out. We went to the streets and we went to the plaza. And we went to a coffee vendor and he asked for 6 shots of espresso. And the coffee vendor lined up on his little cart 6 individual cups. And my
Okay.
dad that did not speak a lick of Italian says, no, 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 1 cup, 1 cup. And the coffee vendor, again, Italian guy, right? From that point of view, looked at him like he had 12 eyeballs. Now, again, I haven't gotten to the point where I'm drinking 6 shots of espresso at once, but when I come home after I've made made that walk with my dogs, it's a medium coffee with 2 shots of espresso, and my friends call that the jumper cables, and it does. It gets me started.
Yeah, I love it. And I would expect nothing less. It lines up perfectly, Kevin. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join Shift Happens. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I've learned quite a bit from it. And I'm glad that others get to know you and get to know Insight and the partnership and your journey a little bit better. So thanks for joining Shift Happens, Kevin. I appreciate you.
Thank you for the opportunity, Jeff. It's been great getting to have this conversation and showcase some of the fantastic things about Insight. But frankly, like I said before, it's about the human element. And I truly believe that it's about those relationships that we develop over time that matter. And so again, thank you for the opportunity. And we'll see you out there in the field.
Can't wait. Let's go get our jumper cables and get going. Talk soon,
Come
Kevin.
on, man. Bye bye.